Morning, everyone. We're going to start in the States, but it's got a very tight Canadian feel. This guy here is Canadian, and 7 seconds, and only 3 of those seconds he speaks. The rest is kind of.
It wasn't our company in the terrorist report, but we do have components in our products that come from China.
Oh, maybe. Okay, it was 3 seconds of. Yes, we do have components that come from China, says the Dominion voting machine guy. I believe that's who that was. Here is an interesting tweet. I believe it's now deleted, but it was sent by Joe Warmington. I couldn't find it, but that doesn't mean it was deleted. But this is how I found it. So here we go. It says, the lights were on late last night in the building in Toronto's Chinatown, which has Dominion voting systems listed on second floor and Tides Group on the third floor. There was a security car on both sides of Spadina Ave. Building which boasts social work spaces and green roof. Election 2020. Very interesting. If you search for a seized server, you get a very interesting mix of articles. This one would be very interesting for you to read. It says, where's the skills? I can't say that, but the SCYTL's server seized by the U.S. Army in Germany. And then the AP News is saying false reports claim election servers were seized in Germany. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. They're lying, right? So somebody's not telling the truth. Very interesting stuff happening, right? YouTube, the U.S. military has raided and seized servers in Germany. Who knows? Who knows what happened? Who knows? This guy says, and again, this is grain of salt. This is speculative. I saw this map and I laughed out loud and I sent it to all my friends because I just thought it was so, like, can you imagine if Trump actually won California? And I would love it if this map was real. Who knows what actually happened? And this is not a legitimate, this isn't a news person or anything like that tweeting this out. This is just somebody saying, look, it's 410. Based on, it says the raw data in the server seized by the U.S. military shows Trump won by a landslide. Not source, not anything, speculation, grain of salt. I just thought the map looked hilarious. And there was a version of the map that I saw currently with all the states taken away from Biden that he hasn't fully won. And I believe that they currently sit at 232 for Trump and 227 for Biden. So I don't know, right? So that's, right? But who knows? Who knows? They're saying that he only got 128. I don't know. Believable. Illinois, just Washington, Oregon, Illinois, and New York for Biden and a few others. New York. Yeah. That's it. I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea, but this guy, he didn't seem very comfortable there. He didn't seem like he was very sure. Here's Donald Trump. This is last night. Donald Trump from November. Actually, this is this morning, 7:47 a.m. Donald Trump tweets, he won because our election was rigged. No vote watchers or observers allowed. Vote tabulated by a radical left privately owned company, Dominion, with a bad reputation and bum equipment that couldn't even qualify for Texas, which I won by a lot. The fake and silent media and more. And Twitter wants you to know that this claim about the election fraud is disputed. Right? That's notable too. It's notable too. This is a private company that's trying to editorialize the United States of America. A private company that enjoys protection under, Section 29 or Charter 29 or something like that. Oh, there's some layer of protection where they say, oh, we're not publishers, but they're editorializing, right? Like they're trying to frame your view of this, right? And that's not allowed, right? Before it was we're third-party publishers of other people's information, but now they're doing much more than just that, right? So should they continue to deserve the protection of the legal layer of protection they enjoy because they say that they're third-party displayers of other people's opinion, Twitter and Facebook, I don't know. How long will that last? How long can they do this with impunity, right? Global news. Hundreds of people gather in Washington, D.C. to support Trump's unsubstantiated claims that the U.S. presidential election was rigged. Okay, I showed you the map to prime you for that, right? Was it rigged? Rigged for who exactly? Okay, here's the hundreds of people, says Ezra Levent, right? Hundreds. And that's a lot of people, right? And that's a lot of people, isn't it? Here's another view, right? Lots of people. Here's a YouTube video. Lots and lots of people. There's a crowd view and like 3 minutes of walking through the crowd. And I don't know what the yellow flags are for. Dead people don't vote. Yes, they do. They all vote Democrat. But yeah, very interesting, right? Very interesting crowd size. That's wild, right? That's wild. I would have loved to gone down. Too bad the borders are closed. Okay, getting into a little bit more hard Canadian news. I can't wait to see how this Dominion thing shakes out. Because if the Dominion thing shakes out, if half of what Trump is saying is true, and it looks like there's some of it that's true, it's not often that Trump mouths off and doesn't end up being right in the end, right? And well, if that's true, what does that say about our elections, right? And again, I want to underscore this. I know that we use them. Canada uses them in New Brunswick and Ontario for provincial elections. I don't know if we use them federally. I can't find a link. If anybody can find a link about did we use them federally, I'd love to see it. But as far as I couldn't find anything about that. But there are other ways to swing an election, and I think that they used all of them during this 2020 presidential election, and they used a lot of them during Canada's elections too. There's the media bias, the social media bias, the silencing of conservatives, the wholesale. I mean, the ability to incite violence against conservatives, or people who agree with Trump, or whatever you want to call them, however you want to target them. But people who invite violence against Trump are not seen as bad people at all. They're seen as like heroes, right? Oh, you said it the best. LOL, right? Comedy is just taken a nosedive. It's not funny anymore. It's ridiculous, right? You don't want to sit there and watch a Colbert-like person, or even what's his name, the guy who took over for Jon Stewart, it was terrible. It wasn't a very good. Like, why bring somebody from the outside to change the show? I don't know. Anyway, regardless, I used to watch them because I thought they were funny, but you don't want to have people only take the piss out of the world leaders and never give them credit. I mean, like, there's a little bit of give and take, and even Stewart and Colbert did, George Bush when he did something right or whatever. But the more I think about it, the more they were probably controlled opposition, and that's why they left in 2016. Because I mean, you can't help but cover Hillary badly. Like if you're trying to make fun of her, there's nobody who would say those shows would have helped Hillary. Nobody. Okay, sorry, I'm way off. Budget. Let's talk about the Canadian budget. Sun editorial, Freeland plans budget next year. Next year? Who needs to know what we're spending? Who cares, guys? Stay home, stay safe. Right? I mean, really, that's what we're talking about here, right? Freeland plans a budget next year. By the time Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland delivers a federal budget next spring, it will be 2 years after the last one, during a period of unprecedented government spending because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The current federal deficit is estimated at over $343 billion. The federal debt is debt at over $1 trillion. The deficit is how much money you're spending more than you're taking in, right? So we're borrowing to spend that $343 billion, and the debt is, just how much that's stacking up behind us, for our kids and grandkids to pay in some tax years down the line, right? Unless they all just usurp our property and say, don't worry, everything's free, but there's going to be some people moving into your house. You've got some spare rooms. Back to this. Canada's 10 provincial governments all delivered budgets in 2020, while the Trudeau Liberals are still planning a fiscal update this fall. Fiscal update, containing far less detail than a budget. The problem, as independent, nonpartisan parliamentary budget officer Yves Giroux has noted, is that with the limited information Trudeau and company have been publicly reporting with regard to pandemic spending, it's hard for the PBO and opposition parties to keep track of it. Last week, Giroux's office released 2 reports critical of the government's failure to disclose detailed financial data as opposed to gross spending that his office and Parliament need to monitor spending effectively. One report said it failed to properly disclose information about $72.4 billion in spending, most of it pandemic-related. Just to put that in perspective, we had a roughly 28 billion, I think was the number, and then bounced around $20 billion deficit. They were spending a $40 billion, they were projecting a $40 billion deficit by 2025 or something, or maybe further down the line. 2039, 20 years, and it was going to go up, but it wasn't going to be so bad because the fiscal anchor was going to remain the same, and it was all growth and blah, 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 like rainbows and unicorns, right? Don't worry about this, citizen. We know what we're doing. And then they fired Morneau because he wouldn't spend. But we're at a situation now where they're just spending $72 billion with no oversight and not even making an attempt at oversight. Budget? What budget? You don't need that. Go back to sleep, right? Who needs a fiscal anchor? Not us, not Canada. No way. Okay, back to this. 72 billion. 72 billion, right? That's like twice what we were talking about the budget deficit being not too long ago, right? Like, it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay. Making it more challenging for parliamentarians to perform their critical role in overseeing government spending and holding it to account. As of the publication of this report, there is currently no public document published public document published by the government which provides a complete list of all measures announced to date, or updated cost estimates. There is also no consistency to which organizations publicly report on the implementation of these measures. The PBO requested the government's fiscal analysis of how much more money is expected to be sent to comply with the legislation, the PBO reported. However, the government refuses to share this data. A third report said the federal spending is sustainable over the long term, assuming no new programs or extensions of pandemic measures are introduced. But that's a big assumption. Recently, I was reading something by the same PBO officer, and he said that we can't keep this level of spending going. It's not sustainable. I wonder what changed his tune. Here's Roy Green, and this is the interview that they're citing, but this is Yves Giroux and Roy Green talking. Here we go.
And by fulfilling that commitment of transparency, the government was providing the House and parliamentarians with an update every 2 weeks on the level of spending to date on the major programs, the major spending programs, CERB being the main one. So the government was providing these updates every 2 weeks to the House of Commons Finance Committee and by extension to all parliamentarians and the public. But with the House prorogued, there was no committee to report to, and the government stopped these biweekly reports. I was hoping that these would resume once the House came back, but it has unfortunately not materialized. So that's what I mean when I refer to the lack of transparency on the government for the spending that it does on our behalf with respect to COVID-19 supports.
So Parliament can't do its job of monitoring where the money's going.
It makes it very difficult. So parliamentarians, without these biweekly reports, they have no clear idea as to how much has been spent so far on the various support programs that the government has established to support Canadians.
And how about that infrastructure spending? Where'd that go anyway, right? Catherine McKenna, she's too busy swimming or, dealing with some environmental thing. Oh, what? She's no longer the environment minister. She's the infrastructure minister. So she really should know where that money's going. Oh, whatever. She's championing the environment, right? After all. So, give her a break. If she just repeats it over and over, if she chooses a talking point and says it over and over, eventually people will start to believe it. That's a direct quote. Paraphrased slightly. Okay, here is Out East. They're reporting. This is Tim. Oh, I've got his name all wrong. So this is Tim. He runs a newspaper out East, I believe. Hold on. Which one is it? Hold on. Halifax Peer Views. Oh, well, I thought he ran a newspaper. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It says Public Health in Halifax is now asking patrons who were at the local bar and restaurant on November 9th between 4 p.m. and close to call 811 for a COVID-19 test, whether they have symptoms or not. Interesting, right? A press release was issued on November 13th regarding the potential exposure at the local and asking anyone who is there to monitor for symptoms up to and including November 23rd. Our investigation continues into several cases within the Central Zone, primarily in the Halifax area currently. At times, we gather information throughout our investigation. That means we have to issue new information and advice. I think that it's interesting that they're demanding a test regardless of whether you're symptomatic or not. Testing asymptomatic people, what is that supposed to accomplish? I shared a tweet yesterday that says testing asymptomatic people is a waste of time, energy, and resources. And yeah, it really, really is. Here's a follow-up from Elon Musk. Somebody said, hey, you got COVID or no? And he says, I'm getting wildly different results from different labs, but most likely I have a moderate case of COVID. My symptoms are that of a minor cold, which is no surprise since the coronavirus is a type of cold. So yeah, I've probably got a cold, says Elon Musk. Here is Europe's second wave. Denmark, no second lockdown. Switzerland, no second lockdown. Germany, second lockdown on November 2nd. Isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting how a second lockdown results in, a worse outcome? Doug Ford doesn't care. Here's an interesting map that I saw. And again, this is not sourced, so please take this as a grain of salt. But I thought it was interesting enough to share. This is the map of the average daily cases in the last 14 days across the United States. And the purple or black is the most cases, and the light color is the least cases. And isn't that interesting that in hot and warm climates, there's much less COVID? Isn't that interesting? Has everybody else got their own version of a little cold happening, right? Yeah. How many people are going to rush out and get tested? Why get tested? What are they going to do? Like, if it gets bad enough that you need treatment, go get tested then. But otherwise, I mean, like, what's the problem? Anthony Fury says, government failed to protect the vulnerable, and now they're taking it out on the rest of us. Yeah, my weekend column in the Sun pages. Government failed to protect the vulnerable, now taking it on rest of us. Toronto Mayor John Tory said residents should not be leaving their homes and only shopping for groceries once a week. I'm referring to something that was said back towards the end of March, right? When we were caught off guard and didn't know anything about COVID-19. That was 8 months ago, and surely things have evolved. We've developed smarter policies by now, right? Nope, Tory actually issued the bizarre recommendations on Thursday, and officials all across the country are making similar pronouncements, trying to push their regions into more extreme restrictions that resemble the way we lived back in the spring. I want to note as well, Guelph moved from the green into the yellow because they imposed the new color-coded thing, and then I believe they changed we got 22 cases. So they changed the color coding, and Guelph was in green, and then we had 22 cases, so they changed us to yellow, and then they changed the classifications down because they were criticized by the health officials. They said, oh, well, we said it should be 10 and you did 100. And so it was 4 times more, or 25 and you did 100. So it was 4 times more. And so the government didn't even bother to fight anybody. They just conceded right away and said, okay, you're right. Definitely we should lower the criteria. The reason I think they did this is because, and maybe I've explained this already, but I explained it to my family a little bit. And that's how I workshop these things sometimes. I'm like, this is what I think. And they all go, and then anyway, so the reason that I think they did this was because I think I probably explained this, but when Ford locked down the gyms and bars and nightclubs the first time, the businesses got together and said, you need to provide us data. You're saying that we're spreading this, and now we're locked down. Our businesses, our livelihoods are shut down. And you can't provide the data that proves that. And they said, okay, fine, open back up. They opened back up, and then they introduced this framework that's got color coding, right? So the framework says now, if you hit this many cases, because of this many cases, now you have to close your businesses, okay? Now they have absolved themselves of proving that the businesses are the cause. You understand? They've sidestepped the data, being responsible for handing over the data to the businesses that they were previously responsible for handing that data over. And so that's why they brought in the color coding, right? A couple of weeks ago, when at the beginning of September, the premier of Quebec and Ontario, Ford, met, and they said in the article, we're not going to use the color coded system because it's confusing for people. Now they're using it to confuse people, okay? And to ratchet up, Guelph's now in orange because they changed the criteria, and so there's all these new restrictions, but nothing has changed in Guelph. And I'll show you our numbers in just a second. It's probably not going to be loaded. It's not loaded. I'm almost done though today, so I'm a little fast. So, but the Guelph numbers have fundamentally stayed the same. And the things that have changed our status have been changes in how the government is classifying things in order to lock us down. I don't think this is acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable. I think if I was a business that depended on being open and I had invested all the money in rent and in the building that you're using, et cetera, then I would be pushing and saying, you have used procedural tricks to sidestep your responsibility to prove this. One person in hospital in the whole Guelph Wellington health unit, and they're locking down a Mennonite community for not complying. Get bent, you liars. You absolute liars. I'd love to do an interview with this person, like Nicola Mersa. I don't think she'll agree to it, but I'd love to interview her because I'd love to get the thought process and defense of this, right? I'd like to talk to Cam Guthrie too. He said, "Oh, we don't want to lock people down." Yeah, sure, I believe you. Don't believe him. Here's the cases, here's the deaths. How many of these were in long-term care? I'd love the breakdown of that as well. Anybody got the data for that? If you've got the data for that, please let me know and I'll graph it over top. Like I'll pull this data and graph it over top. It's just offensive, right? Like, oh, the only way to save us is to lock down. But here's a study. This study proves lockdowns not only didn't stop COVID-2 transmission, it also shows that non-lockdown participants had lower COVID-2 transmissions. You just can't stop a virus, and trying makes it worse. This is the U.S. military. Even a military-enforced quarantine can't stop the virus. Why do you think that haphazardly locking down businesses is going to do anything meaningful? Also, why are we trying to lock down businesses when the death rate is that of, well, it's been in line, the all-cause mortality rate has been in line with the last 4 years, and I've graphed that before. You can check that out, CanadaReport.co. So, these haphazard measures, and I'm not advocating for further lockdown measures, I'm advocating for going back to complete normalcy, because these people are crazy. They've gone around the bend. They've gone completely around the bend. There's absolutely nothing to back up what they're saying. There is lots to back up that masks don't stop a virus, that masks are actually harmful, that lockdowns don't stop a virus, that lockdowns are actually harmful, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Leadership doesn't care. They can't defend these things. What is the Canadian government doing? Senator Leo Husaka says the PM and Canada's chief public health officer are calling for tougher COVID restrictions. Canadians aren't allowed to travel to parts of our own country. Yeah, I've missed out on my Newfoundland trip. We were like, we'll go for Christmas. I don't think we're going for Christmas. And our federal borders remain closed. So why is the government department promoting travel outside of Canada at this time? Here's a Passport Canada. It says, are you planning on winter vacation but don't have a valid passport? Don't wait. Apply now. You can go to communist Cuba and just stay there and work because, communism, right? Yay. Right? Jagmeet Singh puts that fist up. Moron. Lori Goldstein says, and this is the last tab for today, here we go, young activists win right to sue Ontario's Ford government over climate policy. Do we have the right to sue them over the mask policy? Do we have the right to sue Costco over the lack of basic adherence to the Ontario Human Rights Code? There's a lot of people who have messaged me and said, you'll be trespassing, they'll have a police officer there, they won't let you check out. I think probably all of these things are true, but I think that it'd be worthwhile. See, now, here's the thing, two things. You have to balance your civil disobedience with your ability to live your life. And there's Mark Friesen has gone out and got a fine for wearing a mask in public, and he's going to fight it in court. Okay, that's his strategy, and I respect that. I think that that's an interesting strategy, and unfortunately, I think that it's just going to underline that the courts are compromised and that they are going to fine you with impunity. And if you don't pay, or if you do pay, or if you challenge them in court, they're going to make sure that you understand that they're in charge and that you're not, and that your human rights are second to other people's need to feel safe, despite the fact that they're not being made safe by the masks, or the policies, or the lockdowns, or the anything, right? So I think that that's right, but I think that if you go and explain to people, like use the Costco thing, for example, or when I go to a hotel, we call ahead to let them know that we're exempt from using a mask or wearing a mask, and we won't be wearing a mask. So they know to accept that. So I'm going to be calling Costco. I don't necessarily want to go there and stand there and wait for a police officer to come and film it. I don't want to not draw that much attention to it, but I don't need to draw that much attention to it. I'm going to call them. I'm going to ask them to respect my basic human rights and the Ontario Human Rights Code. And then if they don't, I'm going to lodge a Human Rights Code complaint against them. And then we'll see how it works. We'll see that tactic work, right? Let's see. I'll keep you guys updated. We'll see what happens, right? But these things need to be challenged. I don't think that Costco can unilaterally decide, regardless of whether they're a business or not. They're a public space, de facto public space, and they need to adhere to basic Ontario human laws, or basic Ontario laws, and the Ontario Human Rights Code is a thing, right? It's not a thing you can just ignore with a policy. So I wish that the rule of law was still active in Canada, but I fear it's not. I fear these little medium level corporate people who do mean well, right? Like they're writing policy because the insurance people are demanding that they have nobody in their stores with no masks, right? But the insurance people don't override the Ontario human rights either, right? Like your rights are your rights. You don't have a company that says, oh well, sorry, if only your skin was a different color, then you could come in here. We've got this policy, you see. If only you didn't have that medical exemption. We've got this policy, you see, right? Oh, I guess all these wheelchairs. No, I'm sorry. We don't allow people in wheelchairs. Get gone. Sorry about your luck. You got to be walking. If you can't walk, don't shop here. I don't care. Get out, right? Like really, and it's not. It is that blatant, right? Oh, we don't serve people with diabetes, right? Get out. No needles in here. Get out. Maybe it's not exactly analogous. Maybe it's not, and. Perhaps it's not. It's off the top of my head. But I think that we're in dangerous territory, and I think that if a corporation like Costco can unilaterally suspend the Ontario Human Rights Code to demand masks for your safety, citizen, well, isn't that interesting, right? It's interesting that Costco is willing to die on that sword, and the abortion thing is not being. There's no political will to discuss that. Body agency is a foregone conclusion, unless we're talking about masks, right? Body agency, no problem, No questions asked. Just make the appointment. We'll schedule the murder, and here we go, right? And no problem. But if you want to take off a mask in Costco, sorry, man. Nope, not a problem. Or very, very big problem. I don't know. Very slippery slope. Very, very evil world, right? It's inverted, right? It's just a very strange thing, right? Like you either have body agency or you don't. But in this world, it's pick and choose, right? You are able to have input into your teenage child's life unless you disagree with the current woke ideology. And then if you talk about your child's gender, you're going to jail, right? Like there's a whole bunch of little things like that are inverted. The world is not what you think that it should be, or what I think that it should be. The world is not these things that are being presented as tolerant and woke is the wrong word, because it's not woke. It's like it's the current. You have to accept everybody, because if you don't accept everybody, then you might hurt their feelings, and if you hurt their feelings, then they might hurt themselves, and that's on you. It's the same thing as it's my responsibility for your health at Costco. Like it's wrong-headed. The whole thing is just crazy. And I've said this a bunch. So apologies if I'm restating the same things that I've told you before. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.